AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan my wedding without me. I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, Dan, 30M, for 6 years. We've had a relatively smooth relationship and have finally decided to get married next summer. When it came time to start discussing wedding plans, I was excited but also very clear about wanting to be deeply involved in every aspect. My sister, Claire, 26F, who has already engaged herself, immediately offered to help since she apparently loves planning weddings. I thought it would be fun to get her input on a few minor things, but things escalated quickly. From the start, she made it very clear that she thought her taste was superior. She insisted that she would handle the design and guest list strategy and tried to present it as a favor rather than taking over. I politely said that I wanted to make the final decisions myself, but she brushed it off. Then, she started sending me Pinterest boards and saying things like, "I already booked this photographer," or "I found a caterer that everyone will love. Trust me." Dan and I had not approved anything, and I didn't even know she had started doing this. The breaking point came when she invited me to a planning session at a local cafe and revealed that she had spent the last month making what she called a comprehensive wedding strategy, including color schemes, seating charts, and a list of vendors. She expected me to go through the entire plan and approve it on the spot. When I hesitated and said that I wanted to take my time and make decisions with Dan, she rolled her eyes and said, "Well, if you don't trust me, maybe this wedding isn't going to look good at all." I started noticing that she would casually mention things she had already booked or purchased. Once, she told me she had bought invitations that were perfect and that I should just use them. Another time, she decided to book a band she liked, assuming we'd be okay with it. Dan and I were furious, because these are decisions that cost significant money and were supposed to be ours to make. I finally told Claire that she could no longer plan anything on our behalf. I told her that we appreciated her enthusiasm, but we wanted to be in control of every aspect of the wedding. I suggested that she could help in small, non-critical ways if she wanted to, like helping with a minor decoration project or just being there as moral support. She reacted very badly. She started crying and saying that I was being ungrateful and that I was taking the fun out of it. She told our parents, and suddenly everyone in the family was siding with her, saying things like, "Claire just wants to help, and it's not a big deal, you're overreacting." I tried to explain that this wasn't about rejecting her help entirely, but about boundaries. I also emphasized that Dan and I had been together for 6 years and wanted to plan our wedding together without feeling pressured or micromanaged. However, the more I explained, the more everyone seemed to see me as the villain. My mom said, "Weddings are supposed to be a family affair. Why are you shutting her out?" And my dad muttered that I was being too controlling. Even some of my friends suggested I might be overreacting, though they admitted it sounded stressful. After this confrontation, Claire stopped talking to me for a week, and she's now sending passive-aggressive texts, saying things like, "I guess I'll just sit back and watch your wedding fail then." She's also posted on social media about how planning a wedding is hard when people don't appreciate help, tagging both me and Dan, which has drawn a lot of attention from extended family and friends. I feel like it's gotten completely out of hand. I want my wedding to be a celebration with Dan and the people we love, but I also want to set clear boundaries about planning. I've tried to compromise and let her participate in ways that won't overstep, but she refuses to accept that. My parents are now frustrated with me for causing family drama, and I'm starting to doubt if I'm really in the wrong. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister plan my wedding without my consent, even though she insists she's just helping. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for telling my sister she can't move into my house after she ruined my wedding and call my husband a scammer. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Hannah, 27F, who has always been dramatic, impulsive, and honestly, kind of a tornado of chaos. I love her, but she's been a constant source of stress since we were kids. Growing up, she was the one always borrowing money, wrecking friendships, and somehow turning every situation into something about her. I've always been the responsible one, steady job, decent credit, reliable. My parents used to joke that I was the backup adult of the family. I got married earlier this year to my husband, Mark, 32M. We've been together for 4 years and got engaged during COVID. He's a software engineer and started a small cybersecurity consulting company with 2 friends that's been doing really well. I've seen him build it from scratch, working ridiculous hours and stressing about every client and contract. When we announced our engagement, Hannah made a weird face and said, "Oh, wow. Good for you. I didn't know Mark was that type." I asked what she meant, and she brushed it off. I should have taken that as a red flag. Fast forward to wedding planning. Hannah volunteered to be my maid of honor, and I agreed because I thought maybe this could be a good chance for us to reconnect. Big mistake. She flaked on every single task. Didn't plan the bachelorette, didn't help with the dress, ignored group chats. She even forgot to order her bridesmaid dress until 2 weeks before the wedding, and then complained that the expedited shipping cost too much. 2 days before the wedding, she showed up at the rehearsal drunk. My parents brushed it off as just Hannah being Hannah. Mark's parents were not amused. The night before the ceremony, she texted me asking if she could bring her new boyfriend as her plus one, a guy she had met on Tinder less than a week earlier. I told her no, and she accused me of trying to control her love life. On the actual wedding day, things were going fine until the reception. During the best man speech, Hannah started whispering to the bridesmaid next to her, clearly gossiping. Then, out of nowhere, she stood up, walked to the microphone, and said she wanted to say something real quick. I thought she might try to give a sweet sisterly toast, but instead, she started rambling about how not everything is as perfect as it seems, and that people should know who they're really marrying. The room went dead silent. Mark looked mortified. My dad tried to take the mic from her, but she shouted, "No, people should know that Mark is scamming companies for money." Everyone gasped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Apparently, Hannah had gone down some online rabbit hole and convinced herself that Mark's cybersecurity business was a front for stealing data. Her proof was a random Reddit thread about a scammer with a similar company name. It was completely unrelated. Mark's company is legitimate and fully registered. She was escorted out by the venue staff while screaming that I was marrying a con artist. I was crying so hard I could barely finish the night. Mark's parents were furious. My parents apologized over and over, saying they didn't know what got into her. We haven't really spoken since then, except for one short call a month later when she sent a half-hearted text that said, "Sorry if I made things weird." I didn't respond. Now, 6 months later, she called me last week in tears. Apparently, her boyfriend kicked her out, and she has nowhere to live. She asked if she could stay with me and Mark for a little while. I immediately said no. She sounded shocked and said, "You're really going to hold a grudge over that wedding thing? I was just trying to protect you." I told her she humiliated me in front of everyone I love and nearly ruined my marriage. So no, I didn't feel comfortable having her in my home. She started crying and said I was abandoning family and that blood should matter more than pride. My mom called me afterward and said she understood my feelings, but that Hannah doesn't have anyone else and that it would be Christian of me to let her stay until she gets back on her feet. Mark was immediately like, "Absolutely not." He said he'd move into a hotel if she came anywhere near our house. He's still embarrassed by what she said at the wedding, and even though everyone knows it wasn't true, it left a stain. A few of his business partners actually heard about it afterward and asked questions, so it genuinely affected his reputation. I told my mom that Hannah could stay with him instead, but my parents recently downsized to a 1-bedroom apartment and said they literally don't have room. My mom said, "You have a guest room. She's your sister." I responded, "She's also the person who accused my husband of being a criminal on our wedding day." Since then, my family group chat has been a war zone. My dad says I'm being cold-hearted. My mom keeps sending guilt trip Bible verses, and Hannah is posting vague stuff on Facebook about how some people turn their backs on you when you need them most. To make it worse, some extended relatives reached out saying they heard I'm kicking Hannah while she's down. Apparently, she's telling people that she just made a mistake and that I'm punishing her forever. Here's the thing. I do feel bad that she's struggling. I know she's impulsive and probably mentally unwell in some way, but she's an adult who refuses to take accountability for anything. Every time I've tried to help her, she's burned me. She's lied about money, borrowed my car and gotten parking tickets, and once told one of my ex-boyfriends that I cheated on him, which wasn't true either. Mark told me he'd support whatever I decide, but he made it clear he'd lose all trust in me if I brought her into our home. He said, "You know how she is. The second she's under our roof, we'll never get her out." He's right. Still, I can't shake the guilt. My mom keeps saying, "What if she ends up on the street?" And it's eating at me. But I also know that letting her in would destroy the peace we've finally built after all the chaos she caused. So now I'm torn between protecting my marriage and my sanity or doing what my family keeps telling me is the right thing. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after everything she did. AITA for refusing to let my sister's husband stay at my house after a huge fight at my wedding. I, 32F, recently got married, and the wedding was mostly wonderful except for one major incident involving my sister, Laura, 30F, and her husband, Dan, 34M. The fallout has been messy, and now my family is divided over whether I handled things the right way. I need an outside perspective because my feelings are all over the place. The problem started about a month before the wedding. Laura and Dan were asked to be part of the bridal party, which initially they were excited about. But then, as the planning went on, I noticed that Dan was increasingly being critical of some of our choices. He complained about the venue, the seating chart, even the catering. I brushed it off at first because I figured wedding stress brings out weird opinions in people, but it kept escalating. Laura started picking up on some of his suggestions, and soon I felt like I was constantly defending my decisions to both of them. Things came to a head the week before the wedding. My cousin, who was helping with decorations, mentioned to me that Dan had tried to convince Laura to ask me to change the flower arrangements because he thought they didn't match my personality. That was the tipping point for me. I confronted Laura and Dan and told them that while I appreciated their input, the wedding was my day and my decisions needed to be respected. Laura got defensive and said I was being overly sensitive, and Dan said I was being ridiculous and controlling. It ended with them storming out of my apartment during the final week of planning. Fast forward to the wedding day. Most of the day went smoothly, but Dan was visibly tense, making small comments that I overheard about the food being mediocre and the music too mainstream. At dinner, he loudly told a few relatives that he thought my choice of dress for the bridesmaids was questionable and that my mother had overstepped on the centerpieces. My husband, 30M, tried to calm the situation, but Dan kept going, and it reached a point where I literally had to stop eating because I was shaking from anger. After the reception, my husband and I went to our hotel. Laura and Dan stayed at the house we had rented for family members coming in from out of town. That's when things got really bad. Apparently, during the reception, Dan got into a shouting match with my cousin, blaming him for embarrassing his wife in front of everyone. Laura tried to mediate, but Dan was so aggressive that my cousin refused to talk to him for the rest of the night. The next morning, I got a call from my mom saying that Dan had left the house in a mess, throwing things around, breaking a lamp, and yelling at the cleaning staff when they came in. I was mortified. Here's where the current conflict comes in. A few days after the wedding, Dan called me asking if he and Laura could come stay at my apartment for a weekend. They claimed their place had plumbing issues and that they had nowhere else to go. I immediately said no, citing everything that had happened at the wedding and how uncomfortable I felt having him in my home. Laura got furious. She said I was being petty and ungrateful, claiming that Dan's behavior at the wedding was blown out of proportion and that I was punishing them for no reason. She accused me of favoring other family members and said that I was letting my anger ruin our relationship. I stuck to my decision and told her that it wasn't about anger, but about safety and boundaries. I explained that I couldn't allow someone who had been so aggressive in my home and around my family to stay there. She said that if I didn't let them stay, they wouldn't come visit at all, and she started implying that I was choosing my husband and in-laws over my sister. This has caused a huge rift. My parents are upset with me, saying that I should have forgiven and forgotten for the sake of family unity. while my husband and I feel like we're justified in setting a firm boundary after what happened. To make things more complicated, Laura started posting passive-aggressive things on social media about family drama and people who can't handle disagreement, which is clearly directed at me. Mutual friends have started asking me if I overreacted, and I honestly don't know if I did. On one hand, Dan's behavior was outrageous, disrespectful, and even borderline abusive. On the other hand, I'm aware that family sometimes needs compromise and that refusing shelter to a relative could be seen as extreme. I've also been told by a few friends that my response, while understandable, might have been influenced by my stress and adrenaline from the wedding itself. But even after cooling off for a couple of weeks, I feel no desire to invite him into my home. The idea of having him there, even for a few days, makes me physically anxious. My husband supports me fully, but the emotional fallout with my sister and parents is making me question whether I'm being too rigid. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's husband stay at my apartment after the wedding. I genuinely want peace in the family, but I also feel like some lines were crossed that shouldn't be ignored. AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she sabotaged my wedding plans. So, this is a long one, but I'll try to lay everything out clearly. I, 32F, have a younger sister, Emma, 28F, and our relationship has always been complicated. Growing up, she was the golden child in our family, and I was always more of the responsible, quiet one. My parents have a history of playing favorites, which caused a lot of tension between us, but we still had moments where we were genuinely close. Fast forward to last year, I got engaged to my fiancé, James, 33M, who is amazing and really supportive. I want a wedding that was intimate but meaningful, about 70 guests, mostly family and close friends. I started planning early and kept things private, not posting anything on social media until we had details finalized. I wanted to avoid the kind of drama I've seen in other families, especially given Emma's tendency to feel left out if she's not at the center of attention. Everything was going smoothly until Emma somehow found out about the wedding date and venue. At first, I thought it was harmless curiosity, but things escalated. 2 months before the wedding, I started noticing weird issues with the guest list. People were getting double invitations, some from me and some from Emma. She had apparently sent out her own formal invitation, telling certain friends they were invited to a different location and date that conflicted with our wedding. Naturally, this caused confusion, with some guests RSVPing to her event instead of ours. When I confronted her, she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about, and that she was just helping me celebrate by planning a surprise party for a few friends who couldn't make the wedding. It sounded plausible at first, but then I found out she had booked a small hall and even ordered decorations for what was basically a competing event the same day as my wedding. I was furious and confronted her again. This time, she admitted she did it because she was hurt that I didn't make her a maid of honor. She told me she felt like I always prioritized James over her and that she wanted a special day for the people who actually care about me. She didn't apologize. She just said she wasn't going to let me steal the spotlight. I tried to salvage the wedding and made a last-minute change to the seating arrangements, which caused me a ton of stress. A few of my older relatives even commented that it seemed like she was intentionally trying to embarrass me. On the day of the wedding, she refused to participate in any of the wedding traditions, skipped the rehearsal, and when it came to the ceremony, she sat in the back sulking and refused to acknowledge James at all. After the wedding, things remained tense. Emma claimed she didn't do anything wrong and said our parents were overreacting. She also implied that I was ungrateful for all the financial support she had given me in the past. Now, here's where it escalates. Recently, Emma reached out asking for a large sum of money. She wants to borrow $15,000 to start a new business because she claims she's been struggling financially since quitting her job last year. I told her I couldn't help her because I've been saving for a down payment on a house with James and I have other expenses. She blew up and accused me of being selfish, saying I owe her after everything she's done for me, including supposedly helping with my wedding costs. I reminded her that she didn't help, and in fact, she actively sabotaged my wedding. She dismissed it as no big deal and kept insisting that I should just give her the money. Our parents are now involved. My mom thinks I should help Emma because family sticks together and that I'm being too harsh. My dad is slightly on my side, but is urging me to think about it carefully because Emma has a tendency to cut people off when she doesn't get what she wants. I feel like I'm being reasonable. Emma deliberately caused chaos at one of the most important moments of my life and now expects me to bail her out financially. I told my parents that helping her would feel like rewarding bad behavior, and I don't want to enable her. They say I should forgive and forget, but I don't think this is a matter of forgiveness. It's a matter of protecting myself and my fiancé from more unnecessary stress. I've also been worried that if I give her the money, it will just set a precedent for future manipulations. She's asked repeatedly over the past year for financial help, and I've always politely declined or suggested alternatives. But now she's framing it as a moral obligation because she considers the wedding a shared event and claims I benefited from her sacrifice and planning. I'm at a loss because the tension has gotten so bad that I barely speak to her, and I really don't want to start a permanent rift, but I also feel like giving her money would be a huge mistake. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my sister $15,000 after she actively sabotaged my wedding and is now asking for financial help. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend stay at our family cabin after he disrespected my rules. I, 32F, have a family cabin in a remote area upstate that has been in my family for decades. My parents bought it before I was born, and over the years, it became a sort of tradition for our family to spend weekends there, especially in the summer. When my parents passed away a few years ago, my younger sister, Emily, 29F, and I inherited it jointly. We have different approaches to how we use the cabin. I like keeping it very organized, strict about rules, and clean. There's only so much water pressure, and certain areas are off limits without supervision. Emily is more relaxed. She likes having friends over and letting people crash without much notice. It has caused tension in the past, but we've mostly compromised. The issue started a few months ago when Emily started dating someone seriously. Let's call him Jake, 30M. I had met him a few times, and he seemed okay. The problem arose when Emily invited him to spend a weekend at the cabin without asking me first. I was initially fine with him visiting, but I had specific rules in place that she knows about. He needed to follow the cleaning schedule, respect certain areas like the pantry, my parents' study room, which is now my private workspace, and the shed where we keep some valuable tools, and limit overnight stays unless both of us agreed. The first red flag was when Emily told me Jake had already arrived. I called her to clarify what the plan was, and she said he was just crashing for a night and that she would handle everything. I told her that wasn't okay, that the rules exist for a reason, and that I couldn't allow him to stay unless he agreed to follow them. She got defensive, saying I was overreacting, that he's mature and responsible, and that I was being controlling as usual. That weekend, I went up to the cabin myself because I had some work to do there. When I arrived, I noticed that Jake had already used my workspace without permission, taken some tools from the shed, and left food wrappers in the pantry. I was frustrated and called Emily, asking her to make sure he followed the rules. She brushed it off, saying he didn't do anything serious and that I should relax. I reminded her that this wasn't just about being tidy. It was about respecting property that we both inherited and maintaining boundaries my parents set decades ago. She snapped at me, saying I was making a big deal over nothing, and accused me of not trusting her judgment. Things escalated when I found that he had used some old camping equipment that was actually unsafe and broke one of the tents. I was furious because this was something I explicitly told both of them not to touch. I asked him to leave immediately. Emily tried to argue, saying I was being harsh and that it was just a tent. I stood my ground, and he left. Emily was visibly upset with me for the next few days, saying I had embarrassed her in front of him and that I was turning him against her. Since then, Emily has been passive-aggressive whenever I bring up the cabin. She's invited friends over without telling me, and I've had to enforce my rules more strictly. She accused me of being controlling and said that if I continue to dictate who can and cannot come, she'll stop using the cabin altogether. I told her that the rules are not negotiable and that anyone staying there must follow them. She claims I'm being unreasonable, and our relationship has been strained. Friends and family are divided. Some say I have the right to enforce rules on property I co-own, while others say I'm being overly rigid and damaging my relationship with my sister. I feel torn because I want to maintain boundaries and protect what's important to me, but I also don't want to be the reason my sister feels alienated. At the same time, I can't just ignore the fact that Jake disrespected rules that were clearly communicated, and I don't want to set a precedent that ignoring rules is acceptable. Emily has hinted that if I don't ease up, she might cut me out of family trips entirely, which would be heartbreaking. AITA for refusing to let her boyfriend stay at our cabin after he broke the rules and insisting that everyone, including her, respect the boundaries I set. AITA for refusing to give my younger brother a significant portion of my inheritance after our parents passed away. So, I, 32M, recently inherited a substantial amount of money from my parents who passed away unexpectedly last year. I have one younger brother, 28M, and a younger sister, 25F. Growing up, my brother and I had a complicated relationship. He was always the golden child in my parents' eyes, the one who never got into trouble, got good grades effortlessly, and generally seemed to make life easier for them. Meanwhile, I struggled with anxiety and depression, and my parents were supportive but often frustrated with my drama, which honestly left a mark on me. After our parents passed, I was named the primary beneficiary of their estate because I had been living in the family home and handling all the logistics while they were ill. I inherited the house, their investments, and a decent chunk of cash. My sister received a smaller but fair share, mostly cash and a few personal items. My brother, however, came to me 2 weeks after the will reading and demanded a large portion of my inheritance. He said it was unfair that I got the house and most of the money when he had sacrificed so much in his own life, and that the estate should be split evenly among us three. He went on about how he had spent years taking care of our parents in small ways, and he didn't feel acknowledged in the will. He also mentioned that he had been struggling financially and hinted that he couldn't afford to buy a house or invest the way I could now. I was taken aback. First, because he had always had a stable career and a high-paying job that he never struggled to maintain. Second, because he was not living near our parents during their illness and only came to help occasionally. Third, because the will clearly stated how my parents wanted their estate distributed and they trusted me to manage the house. I explained all this to him, calmly but firmly, and told him I was not going to give him any additional portion beyond what he was already entitled to. He became furious. He accused me of being selfish, of letting money ruin my relationship with my family, and said that I was betraying our parents by hoarding everything. He even brought up past grievances, like how I had supposedly stolen opportunities from him as kids, and how I was always favored by our parents. He threatened that if I didn't give him the money, he would cut me out of his life completely and never speak to me again. I told him I was sorry he felt that way, but my parents' wishes were clear and I had no intention of redistributing the estate. I also reminded him that resentment over money would never bring our parents back, and that he needed to take responsibility for his own finances rather than trying to guilt me into handing over what was not his. This led to a massive blow-up. My sister called me asking if I had tried to be fair and wondered if maybe I should give him something extra to avoid family drama. I refused, saying that fairness meant respecting our parents' wishes, not rewriting them after they're gone. My brother started posting on social media, subtly shaming me, and even reached out to distant relatives to try and expose my selfishness. Now, several months later, the house is settled. I've invested part of the money responsibly, and my brother refuses to speak to me. Our sister is caught in the middle and keeps asking me if I regret my decision. Friends are divided. Some say I did the right thing by honoring my parents' wishes. Others say I should have shared the wealth to keep family peace. I feel conflicted because, yes, I understand that he's my brother, and I don't want to be estranged, but I also feel like giving him would be betraying our parents' trust and setting a precedent that I could be pressured into giving away what isn't mine. He keeps bringing up all the sacrifices he's made and painting himself as the victim, and I'm starting to question if I'm being too rigid or cold. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my brother a significant portion of my inheritance, even though he insists it's only fair. AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in after he asked me to co-sign the lease. So I, 28F, live in a mid-sized city and have been renting a 2-bedroom apartment for about 4 years now. My brother, Dan, 32M, recently went through a messy breakup and has been dating someone new, Jenna, 30F, for about 6 months. Dan and I have always been close, but our relationship has its complications, mostly around him being financially reckless and me being the responsible sibling type. A few weeks ago, Dan called me in a panic. He had found a new apartment with a landlord who required a co-signer because his credit isn't great. He asked me if I would co-sign for him. I said I'd think about it, mostly because co-signing is a big deal and I needed to know the financial implications. During that conversation, he mentioned that Jenna would be moving in with him. I asked why he needed a co-signer if she would be contributing, and he said that she couldn't because she doesn't have a credit history and the landlord only wanted one guarantor. I expressed my concern, saying that co-signing for someone is a huge responsibility, and I wasn't sure I could do it. Fast forward a few days, Dan called again. This time, he was more desperate. He told me that the landlord insisted I co-sign or the apartment wouldn't be theirs. He also said that Jenna is a great tenant and would help with rent, but I would need to agree to co-sign. At this point, I realized something important. Jenna is not just a tenant. She is his girlfriend, and they are moving in together. I'm essentially being asked to guarantee the financial stability of a romantic partnership that I have no part in. I told him that I didn't feel comfortable co-signing for a couple's lease that I wasn't even living in. He got upset and accused me of not trusting him or supporting his relationship. The conversation ended awkwardly, and I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, Dan showed up at my apartment. He brought Jenna with him and basically begged me in person. He said, "I don't get why you're making this so complicated. You trust me, right? You trust me enough to help me get a place. You're my sister. Just co-sign and everything will be fine." I tried to explain that my concern isn't about trust. It's about financial liability and boundaries. I told him that if he defaults, I would be legally responsible for the rent, and that's not something I'm willing to risk for a relationship I'm not a part of. Then Jenna started talking. She said she understood my concerns, but also hinted that it would be so much easier if I just agreed. She mentioned that she had been in a similar situation with a family member once, and they had just helped out, so I should consider it a favor. At that point, I felt extremely uncomfortable. I tried to set boundaries, saying that I wasn't going to co-sign and that they would need to figure out another solution. Jenna, however, seemed offended and kept giving me these pitying looks. Dan looked frustrated, but not angry, which confused me even more. After that encounter, I texted Dan a detailed message explaining why I couldn't co-sign. I wrote about my own financial situation, the potential risks, and my general principle of not financially guaranteeing someone else's living situation unless I am personally involved. I also mentioned that I would be happy to help them brainstorm alternative options, like finding a roommate or negotiating with a landlord for a smaller security deposit, but I couldn't put my credit on the line. His response was short. "I guess I shouldn't have expected support from you. Thanks for nothing." I was hurt because I've helped Dan in the past in ways that don't involve risking my financial stability. I also felt that he was being manipulative by framing this as a test of trust or sibling loyalty rather than a serious financial request. Then things escalated. A mutual friend who knows about the situation reached out and said that Dan had been telling people I was being selfish and unsupportive because I wouldn't co-sign. Jenna has also started messaging me on social media, trying to convince me to change my mind, even offering to pay me interest or extra rent if I co-sign. I blocked her after a few messages, but Dan keeps bringing it up whenever we talk. Here's the part that really makes me doubt myself. A few days ago, my mom asked me if I would reconsider because Dan isn't capable of handling this alone, and Jenna is a lovely girl who just wants stability. She said I was being too rigid and that family should support each other in situations like this. I tried to explain again that my concern isn't about Dan's character or Jenna's character. It's about me taking on legal and financial responsibility for someone else's lease. She didn't seem to fully grasp the seriousness of it. So now I'm in this weird position where I feel like I'm the bad sibling for refusing. But at the same time, I feel that my boundaries and financial safety are being ignored. Dan has hinted that our relationship might suffer if I don't co-sign, and my mom keeps trying to guilt me into it. I haven't spoken to Jenna since I blocked her, but I have a feeling things will get tense if I see her at family gatherings. I know I could technically co-sign and hope for the best, but that seems like a huge gamble with my financial future on the line. At the same time, I don't want to be painted as the villain or selfish sister. I'm genuinely trying to help them in ways that don't put me at risk, but they keep framing it as me being unsupportive or uncaring. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to co-sign my brother's lease because his girlfriend will be moving in. AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancé stay in my house after a big fight over boundaries. I, 28F, have always been close to my family, especially my younger brother, Matt, 25M. We grew up in a small town, and when I moved to the city for work, I made a point to stay close to him. We're not perfect, but we usually get along well. Matt has been dating his fiancée, Claire, 27F, for about 2 years now. I liked Claire when I first met her, but over time I've started noticing some things that made me uncomfortable. It all came to a head last weekend. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, which I love and worked hard to afford. I keep it fairly minimal, and I like my routines. I usually host my family for holidays, birthdays, and occasional weekends because I enjoy having them over, but I also like my personal space. Matt and Claire have asked to stay over a few times in the past, which I've allowed for one-night visits without issue. Last week, Matt called me out of the blue. He said that he and Claire were in town for a long weekend and wanted to stay at my apartment. I hesitated because it was a short-notice request, and I was exhausted from work, but I didn't want to upset him. I told him I could accommodate them, but only if they could manage sleeping arrangements comfortably. When they arrived, things immediately started to feel off. Claire insisted on reorganizing my living room to make it more welcoming and started moving things around without asking. I politely told her I preferred it the way it was, but she said it looked cramped and insisted on putting my small couch in a different spot. I got frustrated and reminded her that I live there, but she brushed it off with a laugh. Matt didn't intervene. He just smiled awkwardly and told me to let her do her thing. The night they arrived, Claire also started using my kitchen extensively. She insisted on cooking elaborate meals for all of us, which wouldn't normally be a problem, except she used every single pot, pan, and dish I owned, and then left them soaking in the sink for hours. When I tried to help clean up, she seemed annoyed and told me she had it handled. I finally went to bed feeling stressed and annoyed, but I didn't say much because I didn't want to ruin the visit. The next morning, I was woken up by loud music and Claire vacuuming my apartment at 8 a.m. I understand some people like to clean when they stay over, but I had plans to work from home and needed quiet. I asked her to please lower the volume and not vacuum so early. She rolled her eyes and muttered that she was just trying to help and didn't see why it was a big deal. By the afternoon, the tension had escalated. Claire started commenting on my home decor, saying things like, "You really should have more modern furniture," and "I would paint this wall a lighter color if it were me." I finally said something along the lines of, "I appreciate your suggestions, but this is my home, and I'm happy with it as it is." That seemed to irritate her. Matt again did not defend me. He just said, maybe she has a point, in a neutral tone. Later that evening, I told them both that I was feeling overwhelmed and needed some personal time, and that I would appreciate it if they could tone things down and respect my space. Claire got visibly upset and accused me of being rude and unwelcoming. She said I wasn't being a good host, and that my apartment was too small and cluttered for them to enjoy their stay. I tried to calmly explain that it wasn't about size or aesthetics, but about boundaries, but she didn't seem to hear me. Finally, after a particularly long argument about whether or not I was allowed to ask her to stop rearranging my furniture, I told them both that I couldn't continue hosting them if the situation was going to stay like this. Matt looked frustrated, but Claire was furious. She said she would never come back to my apartment again and that I was selfish for not accommodating her properly. The fallout didn't end there. Matt called me the next day, saying that he was upset with me for making Claire feel unwelcome and that I needed to learn how to be a good sister and host. I told him I wasn't going to apologize for enforcing boundaries in my own home. He argued that family should always prioritize each other's comfort, and that I was letting Claire walk all over me by refusing to let her stay. Since then, my relationship with Matt has been tense. He's hinted that he's not sure if he wants to visit me anymore, and has been sending passive-aggressive texts about how family comes first. Claire, of course, has blocked me on social media entirely. Other family members are split. Some say I overreacted, while others say I have every right to control my own space. I feel conflicted because I don't want to hurt my brother, but I also feel like my boundaries are valid. I'm not trying to be rude or controlling. I simply don't want someone to treat my apartment as if it's theirs. I feel like letting Claire do whatever she wants would have set a precedent I would regret, and I also don't think it's unreasonable to expect basic respect for my home and privacy. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancé stay over after she completely disregarded my boundaries and tried to control my apartment. Character count, 6,472 if you want. I can create 2 more alternative versions of this story with slightly different family dynamics and conflict escalation that are also in the 6 to 7K character range. This could make it feel like a series of high-engagement Reddit AITA posts. Do you want me to do that next? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior and being accused of ruining family relationships. I, 28F, have always had a complicated relationship with my older sister, Emily, 32F. We've grown apart over the years, mostly because of differences in our personalities and life choices. Emily is very traditional and particular about social appearances, whereas I'm more laid-back and outspoken. Despite this, we've managed to maintain a cordial relationship, and I've generally supported her, even when I didn't fully agree with her decisions. About a year ago, Emily started dating someone new, Jason, 35M. At first, I didn't have much of an opinion. I met him a few times at family gatherings, and he seemed polite but reserved. However, over time, I started noticing small things that didn't sit right with me. He often made offhand comments that were subtly dismissive or condescending, particularly toward me, even in front of other family members. He would joke about my career, my lifestyle, and even my partner, which made me increasingly uncomfortable. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe he was just awkward or joking. The situation escalated a few months ago when Emily announced her engagement. The family was thrilled, and Emily immediately started planning an elaborate wedding. Almost immediately after the announcement, Jason's behavior toward me became more overtly manipulative. At one family dinner, he publicly criticized my choice of profession, claiming that I was wasting my potential and that I would never be serious about life. I tried to laugh it off, but Emily didn't intervene, and no one else said anything. Later, I discreetly told Emily that I felt uncomfortable and that Jason's comments were hurtful, expecting her to at least acknowledge my feelings. Instead, she told me that I was being too sensitive and that I needed to learn to get along with him. Things came to a head a few weeks ago when I attended a pre-wedding brunch with some family members and Emily's friends. Jason immediately started interrogating me about my relationship, my financial situation, and my career ambitions in a way that felt invasive. When I answered honestly, he scoffed and made a comment about me settling for a mediocre life. I felt humiliated, especially since this was in front of several people I barely knew. Later, when I explained to Emily how embarrassed and upset I was, she told me I was making a big deal out of nothing and implied that I was jealous of her happiness. I started reflecting on whether attending the wedding would be worth it. I didn't want to give Jason the satisfaction of seeing me upset or being used as a target for his condescending comments. I also realized that the idea of pretending everything was fine for the sake of a ceremony seemed toxic to me. After a lot of consideration, I made the decision to decline the wedding invitation. I wrote Emily a long message explaining that I loved her and supported her as a sister, but that I couldn't be around someone who treated me disrespectfully and who had made me feel unsafe and unwelcome. I emphasized that my decision was about my mental health and boundaries, not about her personally. The reaction was immediate and intense. Emily called me and left several long voice messages, crying and accusing me of being selfish, immature, and petty. She said that my refusal to attend had ruined her special day in advance and that I was turning the family against her. My parents also reached out, saying that they were disappointed and that I needed to reconsider for the sake of family unity. Several extended family members reached out as well, expressing shock and saying that I was being unreasonable. I tried to calmly explain my perspective, but everyone seems to be framing it as me picking a fight or trying to sabotage the wedding. Some people even accused me of being manipulative because I didn't want to attend, which felt deeply unfair given that I had repeatedly tried to address the issues directly and respectfully. Emily, in particular, has blocked me on social media and stopped responding to messages entirely, even though I reiterated that my decision wasn't a reflection of my feelings toward her, but rather my boundaries with Jason. Since then, I've been dealing with a lot of backlash from the family. Some people have suggested that I should attend the wedding, put my feelings aside, or fake being happy for her, but I can't bring myself to do it. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if my family's expectations are unreasonable. I love my sister and want to maintain a relationship with her, but I feel like being around Jason would be emotionally harmful and that attending the wedding would send the message that I'm okay with the way he treats me. I've been debating whether to try reaching out again after the wedding to repair things with Emily, but I'm worried that she might still see me as the antagonist or that my refusal to attend has caused permanent damage. I also feel guilty for causing family tension, but at the same time, I feel justified in protecting my mental health and enforcing my boundaries. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior and being accused of ruining family relationships. Character count, 6,522 if you want. I can also write a second, slightly more dramatic version that really hits the emotional high point seen in viral AITA posts. This one is more subtle, almost realistic. The other can go bigger. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé? This is going to be a long one, so bear with me. I, 27F, have a younger sister, Emily, 24F. Growing up, we were pretty close, but things have been strained over the past few years. I moved across the country for work right after college, while she stayed at home and focused on her social life. We've always had different personalities. I'm more introverted and cautious, while she's very outgoing and spontaneous. But I always supported her choices, even when they didn't make sense to me. About a year ago, Emily started dating someone named Mark, 29M. At first, I didn't meet him, so I only heard her talk about him in messages or calls. I'll admit, I was cautiously optimistic because she seemed genuinely happy. However, after a few months, she asked me to meet him in person. That meeting was uncomfortable, to put mildly. Mark came off as overbearing and condescending. He asked me what I did for work, and when I said I'm a software developer, he immediately made a joke about women in tech. Then he spent a good 20 minutes telling me how he'd never had to deal with girls like me, because apparently I was too serious, and he preferred fun people. I laughed it off at the time, thinking maybe I misread it, but Emily saw it and just said, "Don't take him too seriously. He's just joking." I shrugged it off because I wanted to keep the peace. Over the next several months, I noticed a pattern. Whenever Emily would call me or text me about something important, Mark would insist on being included in every detail. If I suggested advice or opinions, he would often talk over me or dismiss what I said, even when Emily wasn't around. One example, Emily had a minor car accident, and I offered advice on insurance and dealing with the repair shop. Mark's response? He called me dramatic and said I was making things sound worse than they are. Emily didn't confront him on it. She just rolled her eyes and agreed with him. I started feeling like he didn't respect me at all. Fast forward to a few months ago, Emily got engaged. She was overjoyed, and I tried to be supportive. She set a date, and I was initially excited, thinking maybe things would get better as we planned the wedding together. That's when the real issues began. Mark insisted that I not be involved in the planning at all. He told Emily that we don't need her input and that she's too controlling when she tried to ask me for advice. This stung because I've always helped my family with events. When I politely said I'd still like to help with small tasks, Mark got visibly annoyed and said, "It's better if you just stay out of it. No offense, but your ideas are outdated." Emily didn't stand up to him. She said, "He's right. It'll be easier if you just don't." I felt completely shut out, but I tried to brush it off and decided I'd just show up on the wedding day. The final straw came last month. Emily asked me if I could help with her bachelorette party. I offered to organize something small and low-key, thinking she would appreciate it. I suggested a nice dinner and maybe a spa day. Mark immediately said no and took over the planning. When I asked Emily why she was letting him take over, she said, "He knows what I like better than you do. Don't take it personally." Then she added, "You always want things your way." That hurt because I honestly wasn't trying to impose anything. I was just trying to help. After that, I started noticing more subtle things. Mark would make comments during family gatherings like, "Wow, you really think that's the right way to do it?" Or, "I can't believe someone would actually believe that." When Emily didn't correct him, I realized he wasn't just joking. He was trying to make me feel unwelcome. I told Emily how I felt, and she brushed it off, saying I was overreacting and that I should try to get along for the sake of the wedding. 2 weeks ago, I made the decision that I can't be around him for the wedding. I told Emily that I would not be attending if Mark was present, and she reacted with shock and anger. She said, "You're threatening me? This is my day. You can't just refuse to come because of him." I tried explaining that it's not about her day. It's about me not being treated with respect and dignity in her own family space. She said, "You're being selfish. Everyone else is going, and you're making this about yourself." Our parents are caught in the middle. They told me that I should just suck it up for one day, and that refusing to attend would cause a huge family rift. I get that, but the idea of spending several hours sitting through a ceremony and reception where I would likely be belittled or dismissed by Mark makes me feel anxious and upset. I've even considered attending just to make Emily happy, but the thought of being treated that way all day is making me physically tense. I've spoken to a few friends about this, and opinions are divided. Some say I should go for my sister, but others say I'm justified in setting boundaries. Emily hasn't spoken to me since I told her I wouldn't attend, and she's leaving me a series of voicemails ranging from, "How could you do this to me?" to, "I guess I don't have a sister anymore." I feel awful, but at the same time, I don't think I can compromise my own mental health just for the sake of a single day. So, Reddit. Am I the asshole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé? AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house when he caused chaos last time? I, 32F, have always been the responsible sibling in my family. I have a stable career, a decent house in the suburbs, and I like to think I'm generous and accommodating. But recently, I had a situation with my sister, 30F, and her fiancé, 34M, that's left me questioning if I'm being unfair. I want to get an outside perspective. My sister, let's call her Sarah, has been dating this guy, Jake, for about 2 years. I met him a handful of times before he proposed last year, and honestly, my first impressions weren't great. He comes across as charming at first, but he's very impulsive, doesn't think about consequences, and has a tendency to get frustrated easily. A few months ago, my parents were out of town, and Sarah asked if she and Jake could stay at my place for a weekend. I agreed, thinking it would be a nice gesture. Big mistake. The first night, Jake decided it would be a fun idea to host a small gathering of his friends in my living room without asking me. I came home from work and found 8 people crammed into my house, drinking, playing music loudly, and using my kitchen without permission. I told him politely that the noise was too much and that I hadn't agreed to a party. He rolled his eyes, said I was being overly controlling, and continued the gathering. By the next morning, my kitchen was a disaster. Plates in the sink, beer bottles on the counter, crumbs, and spills everywhere. I cleaned for hours while Jake sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Later that day, I mentioned that I didn't appreciate him inviting people over, and he said he didn't see the harm in it. Then he got defensive when I asked him to help clean, claiming he doesn't live here, so it's not his job. That was the weekend that made me rethink having him over. I voiced my concerns to Sarah, but she downplayed them, saying he was just trying to have fun and that I was too uptight. I didn't argue with her too much at the time because I didn't want to create tension, but I made a mental note that he probably wouldn't be staying at my house again. Fast forward to this week. Sarah called me and said that she and Jake were planning to come into town for a couple of days and asked if they could stay at my house. She framed it as if it were no big deal and said it would save them money on hotels. I told her honestly that I wasn't comfortable having Jake over because of what happened last time. I offered to meet them for dinner instead or help them find a hotel nearby, but I firmly said my house was off limits for him. Sarah's reaction was immediate and emotional. She accused me of holding grudges and making everything about Jake. She said that she expected her sister to support her relationship and that I was being unreasonable. I tried to explain calmly that I wasn't against her coming over, just Jake. She raised her voice and said I was punishing her for his behavior and that I was letting personal feelings interfere with family. It didn't stop there. Later that day, I got a message from my mother, who was visiting my parents' house, saying that Sarah was crying and that everyone in the family thinks you're being ridiculous. I was stunned. According to my mother, my dad said I was being too strict, and my mom said I should just give him a chance because he's trying. I tried to clarify that my boundary wasn't arbitrary. It was based on a real experience where he disrespected my home and my rules. I even offered to host Sarah alone, cook dinner, and spend time with her, but the discussion went nowhere. Sarah ended the conversation with, "I guess I'll just stay at a hotel and be fine without you," which felt passive-aggressive. After that, I started feeling guilty. I wondered if I was overreacting. I've never excluded family members from my home before, even when they've annoyed me, but the memory of that chaotic weekend is still fresh. I feel like my house should be my safe space and that I shouldn't have to deal with someone who's irresponsible and inconsiderate, especially someone I barely know. But the backlash from my sister and parents is making me doubt myself. So here's where I am. I'm standing by my decision not to let Jake stay over, but now the whole family's upset, and Sarah says I'm destroying our relationship by refusing him. My parents are subtly pressuring me, and I feel torn between maintaining my boundaries and keeping the peace. Am I the asshole for saying no to Jake staying at my house? Or should I just let him come over and hope it goes better this time? Character count. 6,496 if you want. I can expand this slightly to push it closer to 7,000 characters while keeping it realistic and Reddit style. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior, even though it's causing a huge rift in my family. I, 28F, have always been close to my family, particularly my younger sister, Megan, 25F. We grew up in a very tight-knit household, and I have always considered us each other's confidants. Our parents are loving, but have a tendency to avoid confrontation, which has sometimes made family dynamics complicated. Megan recently got engaged to a man named Daniel, 27M, and I've had a bad feeling about him almost from the start. I know that might sound judgmental, but I'm going to explain why I feel this way. When Megan first started dating Daniel, he seemed nice enough in public, polite, and even charming. However, over time, I noticed that he could be extremely controlling and manipulative, particularly around Megan. I first became concerned when he started telling her what to wear, who to hang out with, and subtly undermining her decisions. I try to be supportive without overstepping, because I didn't want to come off as the jealous sister or ruin their relationship. But his behavior escalated. For example, Megan had a long-standing tradition of spending every New Year's Eve with our family. Last year, Daniel insisted she cancel to be with his friends. He told her she owed it to him since it was his last year working at a company with a strict holiday schedule. Megan reluctantly canceled, even though she was visibly upset about missing the family gathering. That's when I realized this wasn't just a phase or a difference in priorities. This was a pattern of him isolating her from her support system. Fast forward to their engagement, I try to keep my feelings to myself and support Megan. She was thrilled, and I wanted to be happy for her. But I started noticing more controlling behavior. Daniel constantly called her during work hours, would dictate how she spent her free time, and made comments about how she should handle finances and household chores after marriage in a way that felt demeaning and overbearing. I voiced my concerns gently once, suggesting that she take some time to consider whether the engagement was right for her, but Megan got defensive. She told me I was overreacting and that Daniel was just a little particular, like anyone else. The breaking point came last month. Megan asked me to help her with wedding planning, and I agreed because I genuinely wanted to be involved. But almost immediately, Daniel began to interfere. He insisted on certain vendors that were overpriced or low quality, vetoed ideas that Megan liked, and even made passive-aggressive comments about my suggestions. I tried to stay neutral, but one day he openly criticized me in front of the wedding planner, saying that I didn't understand what a classy wedding looks like, and implying that my opinions were worthless. Megan laughed nervously and didn't defend me. I left the meeting feeling humiliated and frustrated. After that incident, I started having serious doubts about attending the wedding at all. It wasn't about ruining Megan's day. It was about my own mental health and boundaries. I sat down with her and explained why I was hesitant to attend. I told her that Daniel's behavior had made me uncomfortable, that I didn't feel respected or safe around him, and that I couldn't in good conscience celebrate someone who treats my sister this way. I emphasized that this was about him, not her, and that I loved her. Megan reacted in ways I hadn't expected. She started crying, yelling, and accusing me of trying to control her life, just like Daniel supposedly does. She said I was being selfish, that weddings were about supporting the bride, and that my refusal to attend was humiliating her in front of everyone. Our parents got involved, trying to mediate, and they've essentially told me that I need to put my feelings aside for the sake of the family. I tried explaining that my feelings are valid, but they see it as dramatic and disruptive. Since then, the tension has been unbearable. Family members have taken sides, with some saying I'm overreacting and that I should just be polite for one day, while others quietly support me but are too scared to speak up. I've had friends tell me I should just suck it up for the sake of Megan, but I can't shake the feeling that attending the wedding would mean condoning Daniel's behavior toward my sister and endorsing the way he treats her. I know it sounds extreme, and I've tried everything to maintain some semblance of peace. I offered to help with planning without attending. I tried having calm conversations with Megan, and I even considered going for only the ceremony. But every time, Daniel's interference and Megan's refusal to acknowledge the problem makes me feel like my presence would not be welcomed, just tolerated. Now, the wedding is 2 weeks away, and the family drama has reached a fever pitch. Megan has blocked me on social media. Our parents are frustrated, and even friends who were once neutral are messaging me with their opinions. I feel like I'm being pressured into attending against my instincts, and I don't know how much more I can take emotionally. I still love my sister dearly, but I also need to protect myself and my boundaries. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior, even though it's tearing my family apart. AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her boyfriend to my wedding, even though my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. I, 29F, have been engaged to my fiancé, Alex, 31M, for about a year. We've been together for almost 6 years, and we're finally planning our wedding. I've always been close with my family, especially my sister, Mia, 26F, but things have been tense for the past couple of years. Mia has a habit of dating men who are, to put it bluntly, terrible for her. We're talking guys who have cheated on her, lied about jobs, or been controlling. I've always tried to support her through heartbreaks, but she never seems to learn from these relationships. A few months ago, she started dating someone new, Mark, 28M. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after a few weeks of him being around family, I noticed some red flags. He constantly interrupts people, has a condescending tone, and makes sarcastic jokes at my sister's expense that she laughs off but clearly bothers her. I've also seen him lie to my parents about minor things like claiming he's going to the gym, but instead going to a bar, and once he even got into a heated argument at a family gathering over something petty. I mentioned some of my concerns to Mia, but she insists I'm overreacting and that he's different for her. Fast forward to the wedding planning. Alex and I are planning a relatively small wedding, about 90 guests, mainly family and close friends. We wanted it to be intimate, which means we have to be very selective with who we invite. I made the guest list months ago, and I included Mia because I consider her a huge part of my life. However, I didn't include Mark. When I told Mia she could bring a plus one, she immediately asked if Mark could come. I explained that because the wedding is small, we're only allowing significant others of people in committed relationships of at least a year, and since we already had to make cuts, plus ones for new boyfriends like Mark couldn't be accommodated. I tried to be polite and suggested she could attend alone, or maybe consider letting Alex and me host a casual dinner after the wedding to celebrate with Mark. Mia did not take it well. She accused me of being controlling, jealous, and unfair. She said I was discriminating against her boyfriend without even giving a chance. She claimed that this is my wedding, and I'm making it all about Alex and me, but she shouldn't have the right to decide who she brings. She even implied I'm trying to humiliate her in front of our family by not letting him come. Things escalated when our parents got involved. They called me and said I was being unreasonable. They argued that Mia is an adult, Mark is her boyfriend, and I should just let him come. They even mentioned that excluding him could cause a rift between siblings and could make me seem petty in front of extended family. I explained our reasoning about the size of the wedding and the red flags I've seen, but they said I was overstepping and trying to control Mia's life. Alex has been supportive but worried about family drama, and I think that's made it worse. I tried reaching a compromise. I offered that if Mark could be respectful, not drink excessively, and follow basic etiquette, he could be at the rehearsal dinner or at the after party. But Mia said that wasn't enough. She wants him at the wedding itself. I've also considered that I might be perceived as judgmental, but I genuinely feel uncomfortable with him being present on a day that's supposed to be about me and Alex. I also feel like including him would implicitly give him approval, which I'm not comfortable with given what I've observed. My fiancé is on my side, but frustrated because he feels like family drama is overshadowing our wedding planning. We've both been receiving a lot of guilt trips from relatives and family friends. Some of them have even said things like, "It's her sister. You shouldn't be so harsh," or "What will people think if you don't let him come?" I've tried to remind myself that it's my day and my boundaries, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being painted as the villain. I also worry about my relationship with Mia. She's been distant and passive-aggressive ever since I told her no, leaving me constantly stressed whenever we speak. But at the same time, I can't compromise my comfort and my wedding day just to appease someone else's new relationship. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's new boyfriend come to my wedding, even though my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after what he did to my mother. This is going to be long, but I'll try to keep it organized. I, 28F, come from a family that has always had its ups and downs, but recently things have reached a point where I honestly don't know if I'm in the wrong or if my feelings are justified. A little background. I have an older brother, Mark, 32M, who has always been the golden child in our family. Growing up, he got away with almost everything, and my parents were very forgiving of his mistakes. I, on the other hand, have always been treated more strictly and sometimes unfairly. I love my family, but I've struggled with feeling like I'm always the one expected to behave perfectly while Mark got free passes. Our mother, Susan, has been a very kind and patient person, but in recent years, she's been more vulnerable. She retired a few years ago and has been dealing with some health issues. Despite that, she's always tried to keep family traditions alive and make holidays and birthdays special. She's also the kind of parent who bends over backward to support her children emotionally, even when we're difficult. Now, onto the situation. Mark got engaged last year, and from the start, his fiancée, Claire, made it clear she wanted a lavish wedding. My parents agreed to help pay for some of it, mostly because Mark promised they could be involved in the planning. Initially, things were fine, though I could already see Claire's controlling tendencies starting to surface. She wanted things done a certain way and was very vocal about it. A few months ago, my mom was diagnosed with a serious medical condition that requires ongoing treatment. She's been stable, but the treatments are exhausting and make her feel weak. Despite this, Mark and Claire decided that the wedding needed to happen on the originally planned date, which coincidentally falls right in the middle of my mom's most intense treatment cycle. When my mom expressed concern about being able to attend or help with the wedding planning, Mark brushed it off, saying, "It's just a few hours. You'll manage." Then things escalated. Mark and Claire started making very specific demands for the wedding that directly involved my mom, like asking her to host several pre-wedding events, organize certain family ceremonies, and even cater to their specific cultural expectations that my mom is unfamiliar with. My mom tried to explain that with her health, she couldn't handle all of this, but Mark accused her of being selfish and not supportive of his big day. I tried to intervene and explain that she's already going through a lot, but Mark completely shut me down, saying that I was overreacting and taking sides. 2 weeks ago, the final straw happened. Mark sent my mom a long email with a detailed schedule of her responsibilities during the wedding weekend. It included hosting a rehearsal dinner, helping with decorations for multiple events, chauffeuring his and Claire's friends, and even coordinating a small performance for the reception. He ended it with, "We really need you to step up. This is the happiest day of my life, and we want everyone, especially you, to make it perfect." The email had a condescending tone, as if he was lecturing her like she's incapable of managing her own life. I read the email and was horrified. I went to my mom, and we sat down and talked. She was crying and said she felt cornered, scared, and physically drained. I suggested that we reach out to Mark together and explain that she can't take on all these responsibilities. We drafted a respectful email, emphasizing her health and that she would still attend the wedding in a limited capacity if she could, but she would not be responsible for organizing or hosting events. We sent it, hoping for some understanding. Instead, Mark exploded. He called our mom, yelling at her for being dramatic and disappointing, and accused me of coaching her to avoid family responsibilities. He told both of us that if my mom couldn't participate fully, then she wasn't welcome at the wedding. He also said some hurtful things about me, implying that I was jealous of him and trying to ruin his special day. Claire chimed in on texts, calling my mom selfish and lazy, and saying, "I don't need anyone who can't commit 100% to my wedding." At this point, my mom broke down. She said she didn't want to attend anymore because she didn't want to be yelled at or made to feel guilty. I supported her decision completely and told her she deserved to prioritize her health. Then I told Mark that if he treated our mom this way, I would also not be attending, and I'd never forgive him for putting her through that kind of stress. He responded with more yelling, accusations, and messages trying to guilt me, saying that I'm being dramatic and that I'm letting Claire control me. I haven't spoken to him in over a week. The wedding is in less than 2 months, and I'm firm that I will not attend unless he genuinely apologizes and treats our mom with respect. My extended family is starting to get involved, and some are saying I should just suck it up for the sake of family unity. But I feel like that's exactly what Mark and Claire are expecting, and I don't think my mom or I should be forced into emotional labor that could worsen her health. I'm torn because part of me feels guilty for possibly missing my brother's wedding, but the other part is furious that he would treat our mother this way. I've tried to mediate, I've tried reasoning, and nothing has worked. At this point, I just feel like standing my ground. So, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after he treated my mom like this? Character count, 6,435 if you want. I can also draft an even longer, slightly more dramatic version that pushes closer to 7,000 characters, with more backstory and family dynamics that make it feel extremely popular Reddit style. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to give my sister's boyfriend a place to stay even though he really needed it. I, 28F, have always been the responsible one in my family. I have a stable job, rent my own apartment, and am generally careful with money and planning. My sister, Emma, 26F, has always been a bit more free-spirited. She jumped from job to job, moves around a lot, and tends to make big decisions without thinking through the consequences. I love her, but living our lives is very different. Recently, Emma started dating someone new, Jason, 30M. From the start, I had mixed feelings. I'm naturally skeptical of people who seem to move in fast, especially someone who didn't have a stable job and seemed to rely heavily on Emma for everything. But Emma was happy, and I wanted to support her, so I kept my opinions mostly to myself. About a month ago, Emma called me, panicked. Jason had apparently been kicked out of his apartment because he fell behind on rent and he had nowhere to go. Emma told me she wanted me to let him stay at my place temporarily while he got back on his feet. She said it would only be a couple of weeks, and he really needed a friend. I was taken aback. My apartment is small, one bedroom, and I'm not exactly thrilled at the idea of suddenly having someone I barely know living with me indefinitely. I try to set boundaries. I told Emma I could maybe help in some other ways, like helping him look for an apartment or giving him some money to tide him over, but I wasn't comfortable having him move in. I explained that my life is structured. I work long hours, and my home is my sanctuary. She argued, saying it was family, and he really has no one else. I tried to compromise by offering a hotel voucher for a few nights while he searched for a place. Emma was furious, saying I was being heartless and that family should help each other in times of need. She also said she was disappointed in me, that I was choosing my comfort over her boyfriend's well-being. A week later, she came by my apartment with Jason anyway. He was carrying a duffel bag and said he was just going to stay a few days until I figured things out. I was livid. I told them both I didn't feel comfortable with him staying here. Jason got defensive, saying I had to understand his situation and that I should help a person in need. Emma said that if I didn't let him stay, it would cause a major rift between us. He stood firm. Jason ended up staying in a nearby hostel, and Emma was silent with me for a few days. She did come over to talk eventually, and things got heated. She accused me of being selfish, unsupportive, and cold-hearted. I reminded her that helping someone doesn't necessarily mean letting them invade your personal space. I offered to help in other ways, like paying for a few nights at a hostel, helping him fill out rental applications, and even helping with groceries. But she insisted that letting him stay at my apartment was the only real way to help. The argument escalated. Emma said if I didn't help Jason, she might reconsider our relationship. I told her I loved her, but my apartment, my privacy, and my mental health are boundaries I cannot compromise on. She left, saying I was choosing my things over family, and we haven't really spoken since. Our parents are aware of the situation, and they are split. They said it's understandable that I don't want someone staying at my place who I barely know, but they also sympathize with Emma's perspective of family first. Some of my friends say I handled it perfectly, and others think I could have bent the rules a little to help someone in a tough spot. I feel like I did the right thing. I set boundaries without being cruel, offered other ways to help, and didn't just abandon my sister or her boyfriend entirely. But I can't shake the guilt that maybe I was being too rigid, that family should mean more than comfort, or that I could have done more to avoid causing tension. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend stay in my apartment, even temporarily, despite his situation. Character count, 6,481 if you want. I can also create an even longer 7,000 character version with extra drama, details about their relationship, and more interactions to make it feel exactly like a highly viral Reddit post. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house after what happened at our family gathering. I, 29F, have always been the kind of person who likes to keep my home calm, organized, and drama-free. I live alone in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in the city and have spent years making it a place where I feel safe and comfortable. My family has always been close-knit, but over the past few years, my sister, Emily, 27F, has become somewhat of a whirlwind. She's always been impulsive, and lately, her decisions have been questionable. Emily started dating Mark about a year ago. At first, I thought he was nice enough, polite, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in her. But over time, I started noticing things that made me uneasy. He would make little jokes about my apartment, like how small it was or how stuffy it felt. At first, I brushed it off, thinking he was just trying to tease me. But the comments got more frequent, and I realized he seemed to be testing boundaries, like he was trying to gauge how much he could get away with. A few weeks ago, we had a family gathering for my parents' anniversary. I invited everyone over to my place since it's central and has a nice living space. Emily and Mark came, along with my parents and a few siblings. Everything was fine at first. Mark brought a bottle of wine, joked with my friends, and acted charming. But then things started to spiral. It began with small things. He rearranged some of my furniture without asking, moved my throw pillows to make room for himself on the couch, and started giving unsolicited advice on how I could improve my apartment. I felt my frustration building, but I tried to let it slide for the sake of family harmony. Then came the tipping point. I had a delicate glass vase on a side table that was a gift from my grandmother. Mark reached over to adjust the lamp next to it, accidentally knocking it off the table. The vase shattered. I was furious because it wasn't just any vase. It was irreplaceable. Mark apologized, but the way he shrugged it off and muttered about just being a vase made me feel like he didn't care about my feelings at all. I ended up storming into the kitchen, trying to calm myself down. Emily followed, insisting that I should let it go and that Mark didn't mean to break it. I told her it wasn't just about the vase, it was about respect. The conversation got heated, voices were raised, and my parents ended up trying to mediate. By the end of the night, the atmosphere was tense and Emily looked upset, but I felt justified because my home was disrespected. After that night, Emily started hinting that Mark might need a place to stay for a while because his apartment was being renovated. I told her outright that I wasn't comfortable having him stay with me. I explained that I value my space and boundaries and that after the vase incident, I didn't feel like I could trust him not to overstep. Emily got defensive and said I was being unfair, accusing me of holding grudges and making it impossible for Mark to feel welcome in the family. She even said that if I didn't let him stay, she might reconsider staying in touch. That felt manipulative to me. I stuck to my guns, telling her that my boundaries were non-negotiable. I suggested she look for temporary rentals or stay with other family members. Emily ended up venting to our parents, who were usually supportive of me, and they did seem to understand my point of view, though they encouraged me to try and give him a chance. I declined. What makes things worse is that since that discussion, my sister has been sending me messages almost daily, ranging from guilt-tripping, "I can't believe you won't help me and Mark. You're being so selfish," to passive-aggressive texts like, "Hope your apartment stays so perfect and untouched forever." Our other siblings have started asking me to smooth things over, and I've been feeling cornered. I honestly feel like I'm being punished for having a personal boundary, but my sister is framing it as if I'm being cruel. I've also noticed that Mark has started liking posts on social media that are about people who are hard to please or family members who are selfish, which feels passive-aggressive. Here's where I'm questioning myself. I know families often have conflicts about space and helping each other out, and maybe I'm being a little rigid. But this isn't just about generosity. It's about protecting my home and emotional well-being. I feel like if I let him stay, there's a high probability that more things will be broken, more boundaries crossed, and more arguments will arise. My apartment is my sanctuary, and I've worked hard to make it that way. Shouldn't I be allowed to say no, especially after how he acted? I haven't spoken to Emily in person since she found out I wouldn't let Mark stay, and our other interactions have been tense. I do care about my sister and want her to be happy, but I also feel like if I give in now, it will set a precedent where she and Mark feel entitled to my space whenever they want. I keep replaying the events in my head and wondering if I'm overreacting or being too stubborn. At the same time, I feel like standing my ground is the right thing to do. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my apartment after the vase incident and his behavior at the family gathering. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.